Hello, hello, welcome back. And today we're talking about a topic that I don't think you have ever heard before in your life. It is so good. It's going to be kind of a harder topic. Not harder in the sense of like hard to understand, but in the sense that most people probably don't want to hear about it. But I think it is so important. We're talking about the devastation of divorce and the spiritual, significance behind it. What actually happens spiritually in divorce. Like it's beyond just the physical thing of the family being separated. There are so many parallels and really deep things that just click, and it is amazing. So first, if I feel a little bit like my eyes are so dry because there's this furnace in front of me. I don't know if you call it a furnace. Anyways, it's like blowing out hot air, and I cannot figure out how to turn it off on the remote. So, oh well, we're gonna have to deal with that. But yeah, I had the privilege of discussing with this person who has unfortunately gone through a divorce in their past and in his past. And there were some questions I had because certain things he would say were just so mind-blowing. And I was like, you have to expound on this. And yeah, so that's what we're going to go through today. It is so good. You don't want to miss it. And definitely comment down below what are your thoughts about this. If you kind of had the same realizations or different ones, or if you've been through it yourself. So let's get into it. So the main thing he had said, which instigated my questions, was this. I learned the hard way of the immeasurable preciousness of the marriage covenant and the family unit that comes from it. I learned the hard way of the immeasurable preciousness of the marriage covenant and the family unit that comes from it. I was like, that is so deep. Tell me more. So when in marriage, when it says the two shall become one, like there are so many figurative and literal ways of this happening. There's the physical union that is consummated. The word people can use is like the ecstasy of it. It is transcendental. It is something you don't experience with anybody else in your life. It's unlike anything else you experience in life. And from that can actually create a life. That is powerful. Like a life can be created from that. And there's also like other videos I've done that you guys can go see. And I have the articles linked below where if a woman sleeps with a guy, his DNA actually gets found in her brain. Forever, it stays in her. So that's another interesting way of how science proves that the two shall become one. It's not just this religious thing that, we can or cannot accept. Like actually science proves this stuff now. It is so interesting. And people aren't allowed to really talk about it. Scientists and stuff, they will get censored and all kinds of things because that is not the thing that the media wants to put out there, and the people behind everything that are trying to push what we see happening in this world and all the chaos and family division we see coming from it. So that's why it's not widely talked about, but it is so interesting that science proves it too. So he was talking about, there's the 4 stages of grief you go through with anything, when you lose somebody, and especially in a divorce. And I can't remember the exact 4 in order, but it's like sadness and then denying it and like all of these things. We can look it up, or you can look it up. Those 4 stages of grief you go through. And during that time, you realize the things that got broken cannot be brought back. And this is interesting because like when I'm speaking about divorce, I'm not just talking about when people flippantly decide to get divorced and just of any other reason, in the world. Like kind of, I'll just say it from like a religious sense. Like in the Bible, it says that, you can be divorced if the other person is unfaithful. Like if you break your marriage vows, then you can be married again, right? It's not just for, oh, we just couldn't decide on like breakfast or whatever people like get divorced on these days, which are like not the big issue. There's not that sanctity of marriage that there used to be. Before it used to be you knew it was for life. And now what do we see? 50% of marriages end in divorce, and actually 80% of them are initiated by the woman, which is interesting. So anyways, that's actual science data out there too. So anyways, going back to when, the things that got broken cannot be brought back. This is especially true when there is infidelity. I'll say exactly how it was written. You realize the things that got broken cannot be brought back. And that's when, I realized the scripture, the wages of sin is death. Because when you're with somebody, and this is how he's explaining that, when you're with someone, you think and you see in your mind of these future events where you're together, right? You think like you're going to experience like the birth of your child together, you're going to be attending some of your parents' funerals, friends, passing on. And then it's even just the little things like the family at night at home and just everyone being there, and the kids experiencing the togetherness of the family. It's like, yes, you can love again, after, this breaking of the family, but you can't bring that back, that togetherness of that original family unit. You can't bring that back for your kids. And that is heart-wrenching. And I haven't experienced it, so I can't say, but from seeing kids who have been through it, or from the parents' point of view, I can see how that's absolutely heart-wrenching to see that and to know that, and just to know that you can't make it better, you can't bring back what was lost. And, I have parents, and the person I was talking to, like, he has parents that have always been together, and, that are together and always have been. And you realize and you see like how important it is and how beautiful that is. Because you see the devastation of divorce on the child's face, in the child's eyes. And the eyes are the windows to the soul, right? You see it in their eyes. Their very being exists because of the union of those two people, their parents. And so when there's a divorce, it communicates that the source of your being is ripped apart. It is upended. It is destroyed. It is like, I can feel that, where it's like you lose your identity almost. And, it makes them question their very being. And on a spiritual level, it's the same. Like God's creation being separated him by sin, like divorce and all of this that happens, like it's just a mirror of the same thing that has happened in the spiritual. And that's the reason the devil goes for family, because it is the representation of the spiritual. And that is exactly what we see today. We see the devil just trying to tear families apart and doing everything he can to separate the man and the woman. In marriage and before marriage, afterwards, like all we see is just the family unit, some driving force behind it trying to destroy the family unit, which is the foundation for society. And so that is really powerful. And, also bringing it back to a religious sense, God says it's not good for a man to be alone. So that's why he created woman, right? And as God is to man, the man is to the woman. And it's the expression of God and man on this earth. It is this beautiful type and shadow. And this is another interesting thing that he was bringing up. And it's something to think about. He's saying in the Bible where Jesus is referred to as the second Adam, which I believe is more referred to that in the New Testament. What does that really mean? to be the second Adam. And there are so many deeper ways that we can go about it and explain, but just on this take, Eve took the fruit and got her husband to do it as well. And as a man, he did not uphold his manly responsibility of being the leader. And so he was dragged into what it was. So it's kind of interesting to think about, like, what would have happened if Adam said no? And well, it says that Jesus is the second Adam. So could God have, through Adam, offered redemption to Eve? It's something that's kind of interesting to think about, right? That would have completely stopped this whole chaos that happened afterwards of now sin coming into the world. Anyways, that's something I don't quite understand, or if that is exactly how it went, but I can see how that could be true, theoretically. I mean, it didn't unfortunately happen, but it is interesting. Some of the beauties in marriage is when you know a person from their younger years, you experience life together. They leave an imprint that's a once-in-a-lifetime imprint. And when a divorce happens, you're never able to look at your previous spouse the same way as the mother or father of your child. That gets ripped apart. And that's when you really then realize the beauty and importance of the marriage covenant. And as like with everybody, you enter it with high hopes. You enter into marriage with high hopes. And, and there's things you don't anticipate happening. Life just throws stuff at you. Like you'll make a mistake and hurt the kid and, either like physically or emotionally. And, something will happen and you will be super mad at your spouse about it. Like you'll be wondering like, how in the world could they have let this certain thing happen? Those things will happen. Life will just throw things at you. Things will shake you up. Big things. Big things will come at you. But it takes self-sacrifice, laying yourself down and being able to come through those things is so beautiful. And I just love this part where he explains that, you will be tested and tried and things will try to rip you apart. But if you're able to have that self-sacrifice and laying yourself down and you're able to come through those things, that is just so beautiful. That makes the deep beauty. It works out such a depth in you and is an opportunity to, work it out, when those things happen. And so he was saying that's what I mean about the immeasurable preciousness. And I think we all realize, I'm not married yet, but people who are married, and even me not being married, I can still relate to this, that, you can see the ways that you didn't love selflessly or didn't sacrifice as much as you could have. And that can hurt. You can see, like, if you get divorced, that there were certain aspects that you even played into it happening, right? It takes two to tango. So, yeah. But I think that's another beautiful thing is when we take responsibility for things that happen, we realize we can change it. Instead of it just being the other person's fault, and then you're always scared of being with someone else because, it's the other person that always messes it up. But if you can take responsibility and realize what you can do better and how to improve, then you have like all this newfound confidence because you're like, okay, I can figure out how to make this work next time or in the future. And anyways, going back to the selflessness and the self-sacrifice, laying yourself down. He was talking about that he sees his parents and his dad lays himself down almost to a fault. And I just think that's so beautiful. And, to see them now, he was saying that they'll be 70 and all the things they've been through. And this last year, And, or especially this last year, he was saying that he's seen them, come into this rich companionship phase. And I just think that is so beautiful. There's so many phases to life, but isn't that beautiful? Yeah. There's been, and talking about them, he was saying they've been through so much and still love each other deeply. I think that's what we all want, deep down inside. And then talking, more specifically about me or all the other planners out there, who like to have everything, all their ducks in a row, everything perfectly lined up. He was saying that, to help me see certain things, he was saying that your difficulty will be, that it's going to be a bit harder for you because how much you like to plan. And if something comes in and throws it off course, how are you going to be reacting to that? That's something to keep in mind. But he was also explaining that it's almost more beautiful when life can happen and things just come at you and you too can come through that. And the most beautiful thing, and what we all want, is unconditional love. Seeing, like how Jordan Peterson explains it, seeing all the snakes inside a person and still loving them. Still being there for them and not leaving them. And then another part of this is because even when, say that if I'm married, say that even when I hurt my spouse, he can still choose to love me. And that's a sacrifice. That's him sacrificing his pride and feelings and seeing the person's heart, my heart underneath all of that. And that person's heart underneath all the things they're doing to make you mad, you still love their heart. And then when they come back, it's beautiful. It's that redemptive love. And I was just thinking that is so beautiful. And that's what, in marriage you do for each other. Because things happen, you'll get mad at each other. But still being able to love them, have that love current that is, that runs deeper than all the things that happen. And you having that redemptive love, it's also type and shadow of God's redemptive love for us, right? And that is just so beautiful. And another point he was making is that feelings are a cruel master. Feelings are a cruel master. They take you up and down. And that's one thing, some men can struggle with feelings a lot. I can see that. But especially for women, we can be, more mindful and careful about our feelings because usually we are more emotional and into our feelings. And if we're letting them rule us instead of the promises that were made and trusting the other person, that can make, life such a roller coaster and kind of a living hell for both parties. So, don't let your feelings rule you. Let truth rule you. And then another point is that the marriage is the safety. When we're talking about all of this, of like, what is the immeasurable, whatever we were talking about. Let's see what our title was. I just love how he had said it. Talking about the immeasurable preciousness of the marriage covenant. Because the marriage is the safety. The marriage is the safety. The thing to make that safe, what makes the marriage safe is the commitment. And that has to be rock solid. That has to be absolutely rock solid. It can't just be like, you're like, okay, we'll just try it and we'll get divorced. Like, no, that has to be rock solid for you guys to be able to open up. So, it has to be taken deathly seriously. And I was like, wow. Because, we see that in like the Old Testament, right? Where things were taken deathly seriously. But this is still something that we should take that seriously. It is that important. So no matter what happens, it still has to be taken that seriously. Like, of course, if there's abuse, like physical abuse and stuff, you can get out of that. I'm not saying you have to stay in things like that. But for just the other things in life, like that commitment is the commitment. Like if you balloon up and, get really, really fat, or the other person does, or when people get sick, and you start feeling like you're doing more than they are contributing to the relationship because you're having to carry more of the load because either they're bedridden or are super sick where they can't do very much. So that's the point where you ask yourself, what's the marriage covenant really about? There's things that happen, like a disability. Someone can fall and get hurt and be in a wheelchair the rest of their life. And you as the wife have to push them for the rest of your life. There's things like that happen. And this makes us look at what the marriage covenant is so much deeper. The realities of life, right? And one day we will have our new bodies and everything will be healed. So it's just this journey of life we go through to become better and become more in God's image of just being able to love selflessly and sacrifice and just truly love another person and help them and be there for them and take care of them for the rest of their life if that is what has to happen, if they are like disabled or things that happen. All of that just shows that it's just this little tiny amount of time we have to go through that. And then all throughout all eternity, everything will be better again and everything will be healed and we will all have new bodies and there won't be any more pain and suffering and despair and all of those things. There will be no more brokenness. And that's just amazing to think about. He says when you fall for someone, like when you're falling in love, you idealize them. And, idealizing is you see all the things that they could be. And if you're mature, you'll see that they will disappoint you. But if you hold on, you can be their biggest cheerleader and you can support them and you can... Let me see. I cannot read my handwriting here. Let me check. And they can feel such healing and depth from it. And, that is what makes the other person grow and become who you want them to be, is when you're seeing their good sides. I mean, when we get criticized or, let's use us as an example. Say when you get criticized a lot, that doesn't make you want to be the best version of yourself. It makes you almost feel like you cannot do anything right and you just want to quit and not even try anymore because there's no point, right? But if you're constantly uplifting the other person, showing them where they're good and all of that, that just magnifies everything in them that is good and it makes them want to be even better because they feel like they're winning, right? And that's a really beautiful concept to remember. And he's saying, and that's what I mean by those redemptive qualities. It's that idealized version of them that you see. That is what keeps you in love. That's how you still love them, even as time does its work and wrinkles happen and gravity does its course, right? It just reminds you of how deep that love is. It reminds you, every time you see that, it just reminds you of your eternity together. And I think this is a really important point. We must go into marriage thinking how much we can give, because most people go into marriage thinking of what can they take. Like, oh, they're going to get all this love from this person and this status and, okay, so-and-so is handsome or beautiful or whatever. And they're thinking all the things that they can get from being with that person. But we must go into marriage rather knowing that we're here to give. Go into marriage thinking as much as you can give. you won't be disappointed in marriage that way, because you're there to give. So it's not like you're going to be devastated when something gets taken away, or they're not as beautiful anymore, or whatever happens, because you were there to give. You weren't there to take and hold on to that, physical transient thing. And going through all that, you're actually healing yourself. And when you love freely and sacrificially, it moves the other person to do the same. And so, what I was thinking is, I was like, this is all so hard. Like, it almost brings me to tears. Because, I don't even know if I can do this, or if I'm capable of it. Or if I'm sure that I'm capable of it, but am I willing? And I think that's a question we have to ask ourselves, because this is deep stuff. Like, it's not just this fairy tale thing that happens in life that, we grew up seeing in the movies, right? Because life happens, and you have to know if you're deep enough to be able to stick the course and stick it through. And so don't be afraid of what you might lose. And this is something that I'm talking to myself. Don't be afraid of what you might lose. And what can you lose? Like control. Wanting things to be a certain way. The fear of missing out. Don't settle for anything less than a true heart connection. Because people think when they say don't settle, if someone says don't settle, what do we think of? We think, oh, well, don't settle because you might find someone with more money, or more status, or better appearance, or better family, or I don't know, more money is what's really coming in my mind. The status, the physical things. When people say don't settle, we usually think of a list, right? But what that really means is the heart connection. Don't settle for anything less than a true heart connection, because that's the most important thing, period. And you guys growing in God together. Because there's not a loneliness without the person you love. Like, say the person you love dies, it's not even close to being as lonely as it is with being with a person who cannot see your heart, and you just feel alone. And you feel like you're in a prison in that marriage. Because there's no love, there's no connection, there's no care. That feels like jail. And so many marriages are like that. People that are so alone together. Contrast that with someone who, their spouse that they absolutely love and adore dies. But every day you wake up and remember that memory, and it feels like you're being hugged every day. And I was like, that is so beautiful. And he was bringing up like a family member, and he was like, she's not miserable. She's older and she's alone. Her husband died that she absolutely loved, but she's not miserable. She has the memories of him. And I just think that is so beautiful. I think we sometimes forget that and go for materialistic things and superficial things, but really it's that heart connection that when you just write for that other person, that is just so beautiful. So anyways, I hope you guys like that, and it brought some more depth and clarity to understanding what the marriage covenant is about, because that is definitely something I didn't really know much about. Like, we know it kind of intellectually, but I don't think we sometimes think this far deep into actually what it is all about. And so I'm really grateful for that conversation, and I hope that helped you guys, and it was really life-changing for you too. So definitely like this video and follow me, subscribe, and follow me on Instagram at @IamVibrantElegance. And definitely, comment below your thoughts. I would love to hear from you. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.